everyone? It is Friday. I don't know about you, but I am pumped. It has been a hectic week. It has been crazy, but it's been fun. And I am just so happy to be here with you guys on my Friday afternoon. So thank you for joining along for the ride. On today's episode of RealAg Live, I have with me a new to ag face. Well, not new to ag, but Saskatchewan ag or my goodness, it must be Friday. I can't even speak anymore, guys. So Saskatchewan Wheat in November hired on a agronomy specialist, and this position was brand new to Saskatchewan Wheat. So it'll be it's much similar to what Alberta Wheat has done. So we'll be excited to have some more agronomic knowledge in Saskatchewan for sure. And on that note, I'm bringing in the new specialist, Haley Tetreault. How's it going today, Haley?
Good, Kara. How are you?
I'm doing well. So, as I said, this position brand new in November. What what reasoning do you think Saskatchewan Wheat had for seeing a need for this sort of position?
Yeah, I think we're kind of at the point now, we're a little bit behind Alberta Wheat, so we're kind of coming into the point where we're getting lots of good research results back, and now there's a need to kind of take those research results and spotlight them and show our producers what their money is working towards. So we're really excited about that and kind of finding those gaps for information for our producers and creating resources for them to use. So I'm really excited to be able to take find those gaps and create those resources for our producers. And then, doing that through fact sheets and podcasts and webinars we have planned. So pretty excited about that. And I think it's going to be a really cool position. So I'm super excited about it.
Absolutely. So are you province wide? Are you, I know you're based in Saskatoon, but is there specific parts of the province you're supposed to cover?
Yeah, so I'm province wide. I cover the whole province, everywhere that grows wheat, which is our entire province. So yeah.
That's awesome. So what sort of background do you have prior to this position? What kind of led you to becoming this specialist? My goodness, it is Friday.
Yeah, so I grew up in ag. Actually, I grew up on a mixed cattle and grain farm out by Leoville. So kind of just grew up in ag, and I'm still super actively involved on the farm as much as I can be with a full-time job. But and then throughout university, I went directly into ag out of high school and did an apprenticeship program basically. So I got a really good scouting experience and then worked in precision ag for just over a year. And I really enjoyed that, but this was just a really cool position to kind of, create those resources that I needed when I was, just starting out as an agronomist, or, the resources I could see that producers could use. So that's what kind of led me here. So I have a lot of experience, especially in the Northwest, with agronomy, and it's my passion. So I'm looking forward to continuing this new arm of my career.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have more. As you guys know, we do wheat schools every year too. And I am really excited to be able to have another agronomist to chat with and to talk about all things wheat. So very much looking forward to that. And a little plug for myself here at Real Agriculture. If you guys want to check out those wheat schools, go to www.wheatschool.com. It's always a lot of fun. So Haley, what sort of things did you see in the 2020 growing season? I know you just had the position started in November, so you didn't really see it as an agronomy specialist. But what sort of things did you guys see on the farm over the 2020 season?
Yeah, so I was working as a precision agronomist. So I did cover a lot of the northwest area of Saskatchewan. So I mean, I can really speak to that. And harvest conditions were a lot better this year than last year, so that was really nice. Guys got their crops off in a lot more timely manner, and so did we on the farm. So we were super excited about that. To not have to dry a pile of grain was super helpful this year. But yeah, we've seen, the farther north you got, it was pretty wet. There's lots of flooding that happened in kind of July. So we did see, some yield loss to that, to flooding and then that early frost kind of across most of the province. I think caught some of that, just depending on, what stage you were at, how bad it was. So there was quite a bit of frost and again some yield loss to that, but I think overall the yield surprised people, and I think that agronomically it was a bit of a challenging year because it was so hot kind of during grain fill and stuff like that. So yeah, it was another crazy year. I feel like there's no more average years. They're all crazy in their own way, but
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It's the thing with the prairies. I know sometimes we see, you talk about things that happen across the prairies, but there's so many different pockets. Like I find even in Alberta, like I'm Southern Alberta based, and it's like we haven't stopped crying that it's so dry. And then up north, they're like, "Can we please have a break?" So it's amazing how vast it really is. And Saskatchewan, you see that too. Absolutely. So, how do you find in your position? How do you how do you think it's going to help your position that you still are involved in the farm, and vice versa? How do you think it's going to help you on the farm that you are now involved with Sask wheat?
yeah, so I think being involved, and growing up on a farm and being active in the farm really gives me a good insight into, what producers are looking for, and kind of helps me. I'm still in contact with a lot of my friends are farmers as well, so that keeps me in touch with, what's needed. I feel like when you're not on the farm, you kind of lose sight sometimes of what's important in that season. So being hands-on and seeing, the struggles throughout the whole season really gives me good ammunition on what to work on throughout, through, oh my, okay, sorry, the
You're
feedback was
so
coming
all
through.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that really helps. And then vice versa on the farm, I think seeing all the new research coming through that, we are funding and all the proposals we're getting, I think it's really cool to be able to apply some of those on our farm as well. So I think it's super beneficial that way as well.
So we got a question coming in here from Mackenzie, and she says, "What should producers be looking for in a variety in 2021?" Now, it's the time of year we start talking variety selection. Do you want to touch a bit on what producers should be looking out for when it comes to variety selection?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, looking for varieties this time of year, it's a great time. You have lots of time still to get that seed in. The biggest thing, in my opinion, to look at is maturity when you're starting out. You need to make sure it's suited to your growing zone. So, the easiest way to do that, I find, is to look at what your seed growers are growing in your area. So, your local seed growers are going to be growing, the most adapted varieties to that area. And then looking at, what are your biggest risk factors, disease and insect wise. So, we know actually, I just tweeted about this last week, or maybe it was even this week, but the Prairie Crop Disease Monitoring Network was talking about stripe rust and how it's looking like it's shaping up to be, higher pressure coming in the 2021 season due to the spore load in the Pacific Northwest. So maybe looking at, say that you're concerned about that, then you can say, okay, let's look at our varieties of grain crops on Sask has a really good, they'll be released in the seed guide as well, but you can kind of see how they stack up in those disease resistance traits. And then something like midge tolerance is something to look at as well. We know that Corteva is no longer making Lorsban, and there's talks of banning it. So that was kind of our best option for controlling wheat midge and their eggs. So losing that possibly in the near future, in the next few years, midge tolerance is going to become more important. So that's something to look at too. And then of course,
What
protein.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. You want to touch a bit more on protein and why it's going to be important when you're selecting your varieties?
Yeah, so it seems like, well, different varieties are obviously going to be, different classes have different protein levels. So you need to be cognizant of that when you're doing fertility planning. A soft white is going to have a different protein and yield target than a hard red. So being cognizant of that is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna touch on midge a bit. What sort of impact does it actually have on the final product of your crop? If we are losing some of these wheat midge tolerant varieties, what sort of impact could that have?
Well, so far we're not losing the varieties, we're just losing Lorsban, right? But making
Mhm.
sure you're keeping that varietal blend with the refuge there to keep because it's a one gene resistance, right? It's the SM1 gene. So being careful with that, and crop rotation helps there too. But Um, sorry, I lost track of where I was going there. But yeah, you'll see damage, and it can affect your yield by, like, depending on what stage the wheat midge is active. It can abort florets, or it can cause damage to the kernel, and you'll see shriveling, and sometimes there's a little white line on the kernel as well. So yield and grade damage.
So short of, like you said, early frost kind of being an issue in 2020 and drought issues in different patches of Saskatchewan, what would you say was the number one yield robber that producers faced in 2020?
I think that heat at the end and lack of moisture, I think, was a big yield loss.
Yeah.
I think it really just kind of burnt off at the end there. We didn't get quite enough moisture, and it was really hot. Depending on when you seeded, we got like a big heat blast kind of right during fill. So I think that kind of affected our yield and our protein a little bit in certain areas. But I would have to say that's probably the number one issue that I've seen this year.
Okay, so what's your favorite wheat? There's tons of different type. I mean, lots of people think, oh, wheat is wheat, but it's not. Do you have a certain type of wheat that you like to grow most?
I would say hard red, just because it tends to have a really good disease package, and that's what I'm comfortable with on our farm. So, and it's what I've worked with a lot as an agronomist. So I guess that's kind of my bias is for hard red, but
Cool. And going forward, 2021. So now we've talked a bit of variety selection. What sorts of, when it comes to, let's talk micronutrients, things like that. What sort of planning should producers be doing at this time of year?
So for fertility planning, soil testing is really important. It's something you can do right now. I mean, if you're just new to soil testing, then maybe it's something you start with, say field A is, you're getting consistently good yield and protein on field A. Maybe let's not worry about that, because our fertility program is probably working pretty good there. But field B, if we're getting, lower yield, lower protein, maybe we should look into that. So starting with a soil test, I think, is really important, just to see what you actually are working with in that soil. I think it's the easiest and most cost-effective way to maximize your inputs of fertilizer, because we know fertilizer is very expensive. So, and it's a really good way to look kind of how our fertility package is working and kind of evaluate that. So it's the best way to start planning is by testing, to knowing what you're working with. And then looking at, say your foss levels. Are we deficient? Is our current foss practices adequate, or do we need to be increasing those a little bit? And looking at the ways that we have to put down foss, for example. So, you're quite limited with foss. You want to keep it as close to your seed as possible, because we know that in the early season is where it's most important for uptake. So, kind of considering all of those factors, and then looking at things like nitrogen. Where's my nitrogen at? Because it was so hot during grain fill, is there maybe some residual there that we can utilize? And maybe, if you went and put down 120 pounds of nitrogen, and you already had, 90 pounds available in your soil, well, you could have a wreck, and you could, have lodging and whatever. So it's important to know what you're working with, and then planning around that. So it can really differ from field to field. But yeah, so I think that's probably the most important thing to be looking at right now, and looking at what that most limiting nutrient is. So Liebig's law of the minimum, we're looking for what, is going to limit our crop the most. And for most of Saskatchewan, it's going to be moisture. But then if you look past moisture, what's the next most limiting factor? And that could be, in a lot of cases, foss is your limiting factor. Or in the more northern zones, potash can be really limiting. So it's important to look at that and work with an agronomist, or, do your own research on it. But it's planning is the perfect thing to start doing right now.
So when it comes to foss and planning, like it's one of those things that it seems like you just can't do enough of. How can you talk a bit about, just elaborate a bit more on the importance of planning for foss, and how keeping those records can really help you moving forward in future years?
Yeah, so it's really cool to see. I mean, sometimes it's not cool, because sometimes it's bad news. But if we look at, foss in soil tests over X amount of years, so say even 3, 4, 5 years, we want to look at that trend, and which way that trend is going. So if you're noticing a net export of foss off your field, then it's time to start looking at that foss regime and start increasing. And, it's not something you can just look at one year because, so say you're limited to seed placement of foss. So in a cereal, it's not a year, it's not a big deal. You can maximize your foss up to 50 pounds in your seed row. But in your canola year, oftentimes if you're limited to seed placement, you're at 25 pounds. So that's your seed safe right there. And you're definitely having a net export of foss in that year. So if you kind of look and say, okay, let's build to our max potential in our cereal year, and then, we can kind of get away with our canola year for now, but then looking at other ways to incorporate foss, like whether you're putting it in your blend to top up, or you're putting it in, a side band or something like that. So I think foss planning is really important. It really shows us, where our soil is at. Kind of, it's the first thing I look at when I'm looking at a soil test is the foss level, and it tends to be, I would say, in 70% of the soil tests I've looked at, that's definitely our limiting factor is the foss. So planning and watching that trend over time is really important, and it's also important if you are soil sampling to make sure whoever is doing it is sampling those same GPS points, because that's going to give us, the actual trend of that actual spot over time.
Yeah, totally. And what sort of, how far in the past, in the future, do you kind of look when it comes to foss planning? Because I know a lot of people think, oh, I just look at last year and I look at the year ahead, sort of thing. But it's a lot more than that. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, so I would be going back as far as you can. If you have soil tests from 10 years ago, and I would go back that far and kind of create a trend. I know working in precision ag, it was something I did a bit, was, going back through all the data and kind of creating trends on Excel, which I know not everyone wants to sit there and do that, but you can definitely look at those trends over time and kind of see where you're at with your foss levels, and really, it's really expensive to fix if you let it get too bad. So if you just slowly build over time, it's not going to be as big of an overhead investment as to just, slowly increasing instead of just all at once. Oh my God, I need to put down 100 pounds of foss somehow. How do I do it?
Totally. And as you said, it's one of those things that can be, I think a lot of producers see it as daunting because they look at it and they go, oh my gosh, this is a lot of information to put in and to look back at. But as you said, if you're looking at your soil tests every year, and most of the time it is foss. So if you're watching and you don't plan for foss, you might want to, because it's a very, very important thing. So we got a couple more questions here. A question from Braden. What's your thoughts on PGRs on wheat?
I think that they definitely have a fit depending on the type of wheat. Like if you're looking at a taller variety that's really prone to lodging, I think it can be really beneficial as a lodging management tool. And then that way, especially if you're pushing nitrogen on these varieties, then the standability might not be as good. So I think they definitely have a fit in that type of situation.
And a question here from Lara. What's the weirdest thing you've seen in a wheat crop? Is there anything that you've seen during your time that you're kind of going, oh, that was off trend?
The weirdest thing I've seen in a wheat field. Oh wow. I mean, one time I was out scouting and I had a group of horses come up to me, and that's probably the weirdest thing I've ever seen in a wheat field. But yeah, I guess that probably qualifies as the weirdest thing.
Yeah, that would be. Were they wild horses, or where did they come from?
I have no idea. They must have been range.
Did you just wave at them and let them go off in their merry way, or how did you deal with that? Yeah,
Yeah, they
that's
just kept
funny.
on going, and I was like, okay, well, I mean, that's not something you see every day, so that was cool. But
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Sean has a question here, and he says, "What is your favorite thing about Saskatchewan agriculture?" So, as a whole, I mean, maybe this is past looking just at wheat. It's up to you on your answer there. But what's your favorite thing about Saskatchewan ag?
my favorite thing would have to be the community itself. I mean, the agricultural community is just so great to work in. It's such a supportive industry, like when you're just starting out and learning fresh out of school, everyone is so open to that. They'll help you out, and they'll let you make mistakes and stuff like that. So I think it's a really great industry, and it's so innovative. I mean, we've seen it. We've had this huge dry cycle in a lot of the provinces, lots of the province overall for the last few years, and the innovation and ability to persevere through that is just absolutely amazing. So I'd have to say that's probably the coolest part is the community.
Speaking of dry, it has been Saskatchewan especially has seen some really droughty patches. And we just we had on the show a couple weeks ago Drew Lerner of World Beer, and he gave some inputs across what he was or some predictions again, what they're looking at for this year. And it seems like it's gonna be dry across the prairies again. Western Canada is not gonna get a lot of moisture. What if producers are looking at that? Was there anything they can do? Is there anything that can be done looking ahead?
Well, I mean, if only we could control the weather, that would be ideal.
Yeah.
And
And
do
we'd have
your
nothing
rain
to talk
dance.
about.
But yeah, exactly. What would you talk about at the coffee shop? But I think probably the biggest thing you can do is try to reduce your soil disturbance as much as possible. To conserve moisture, and hopefully you have that stubble there to trap the snow as much as we possibly can. But other than that, there's really not a whole lot that we can do. I mean, there is research going into drought tolerance and stuff like that, so hopefully in the future there's more information on that. But aside from reducing that soil disturbance, that's probably my biggest recommendation.
So have you been in some of the areas that are really seeing a lot of this drought? Have you taken some soil cores? How far are we really talking into the soil bed when it comes to drought? Is it looking dry quite deep down now?
So last spring, I actually was installing some moisture probes, and it was crazy. I mean, you would see moisture in the top, 2-3 inches, and then once you got down in that, 6 inch to 8 inch, it was just powder. Like it was unbelievably dry, and in those some parts, we did get, some good replenishment of that subsoil moisture. But at this point, it's hard to say. I mean, I haven't taken any cores this fall, but depending on how much moisture you got, it's going to take a lot of moisture to replenish those subsoil stores for sure.
Okay, so you're a prairie girl. You grew up on the farm. You're that idealistic. You're driving down the road and you're looking and you're seeing a beautiful landscape. What is the prettiest crop out there?
Well, I think it depends on the season, because at harvest, it's definitely wheat and barley, that nice
Okay.
golden color. But in season, I would have to say the canola flowering is pretty gorgeous.
Yeah, you can't seem to beat that. So
No.
have you dealt with quite a few different crops within your career? What's your least favorite crop to deal with, I guess?
Um, Scouting canola for insects when it's fully potted, I'm short, so
Oh,
trying to get through that crop and not face plant or get tangled up in it is definitely a challenge. And peas as well is definitely not fun when they're all tangled up. And yeah, so scouting wise, that's definitely my least favorite. So it's nice to be working in wheat now.
yeah, absolutely. I know you always talk about canola and disease, and that's a big one, but you never really understand it till you're walking through a canola field, and it can be dry everywhere else, and you come out, your pants are somehow wet, and you're like, "What is going on in this canopy?" Like it's ridiculous. So
Yep.
yeah, no, definitely get that. So going into 2021, what are you excited for? What are you most looking forward to at this position?
I am really excited to just, find new ways to reach producers and to get these resources that I'm creating out to them. So I'm really excited about the podcast. We're actually going to be releasing our first episode probably we're going to be recording it towards the end of the month. So hopefully right at the end of this month or early in February. So I'm really excited about that. I think it's a really cool tool to use. That you can just throw on while you're, seating or on the road to town or something. So information that you don't have to sit at a computer screen to read. So I'm really excited about that, and we'll be doing some in the field type videos and kind of making resources that way. For example, scouting for PGR timing and stuff like that. So that's really exciting, and then just getting to kind of digest all the sciencey research type stuff and create that as a tool. Like, how can that work on my farm? how can that be useful to me, on my farm as a producer. So I think that it's going to be really exciting, and it's, the possibilities are endless. So that, and also the collaboration with, I see Jeremy's commenting on here, but working with people like Jeremy and Mitchell Japp and Mallory out of Manitoba Crop Alliance. So they've been super helpful to me just starting in this position. So really excited for collaboration with them as well.
Absolutely. I was going to say, Jeremy's saying, competition. And for those of you that don't know Jeremy, he is the same position as Haley, basically, only in Alberta with Alberta wheat and barley. So competition, but I would disagree. Come on, remember, Jeremy always says, just like me, teamwork makes the dream work. We are all a big community. So it's good for sure. What sort of things are you guys are you looking at diving into any specific research this year? Is there anything that's kind of exciting coming up on the docket?
Yeah, we've got lots of, I'm just brand new to the position, so learning about all of our research and stuff has been, it's overwhelming to say the least. There's a million and one projects and different proposals to learn and to read over. So, but yeah, I think I'm really excited to go ahead, with especially the varieties and seeing how they perform and yeah, I don't know, I'm just kind of excited about it all. It's all new, so it's all exciting.
Totally. Is there anything you guys are, so obviously research and stuff, but anything you want to tell producers heading into 2021? Any sort of diseases that you guys are kind of looking out for, or insects that you've seen a lot of last year that could be here again this year?
Yeah, so I guess, well, this is a prime time to talk about our recent collaboration. So we put together all three, Manitoba Crop Alliance, Alberta Wheat, Barley, and Sask Wheat and Barley. We put together kind of a joint effort on bacterial leaf streak, because that's something we've been kind of seeing more of popping up across the prairies. So I put together a fact sheet, Jeremy did a podcast up, and we're really working together on getting the info out on that, because it's not new, but it's relatively, we're just starting to see more of it, and that's just due to conducive weather conditions like high moisture in certain areas and stuff like that. So that's one to look out for, because it is a seed-borne disease. So if you suspect you have bacterial leaf streak, it's important to not use that seed going forward. And so it's really, if you see it, maybe contact your local agronomist or me or someone to come take a look and kind of go from there. But yeah, that was a really cool experience. That was kind of my first extension document that I released, and lots of help from Alberta Wheat and Mitchell at Sask Barley and Mallory as well. So that was really cool. But going forward into 2021, I think there's the potential for high wheat midge populations, just because we've had some wet springs in a lot of areas in Saskatchewan. So that's maybe something to watch for as we go forward. We have the midge maps that come up on, we'll have those posted whenever that map is released. I'm not really sure when it's released, but
I think
yeah, so
Tyler Rist is watching, and he's a big midge guy, so I think he'll probably pipe in with some of that. But sorry, continue.
Yeah, so that's kind of those two, and then stripe rust. We know the Prairie Crop Disease Monitoring Network on Twitter was posting a thread about that. They're saying that there's potential for that to be one to watch in 2021. So they're actually a really good account to follow on Twitter. They have a blog that you can subscribe to as well. But yeah, so I would say those are the top three things that I'm going to be looking for in 2021.
That's exciting, and I look very much forward to seeing what you guys release and what sort of things you get up to this summer. So, thank you very much for joining us today. Somehow that half an hour just goes, and but thank you very much for making it exciting, making it able to go quick. So, I appreciate that very much. And how can producers reach out to you if they're looking for some agronomic advice?
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter. It's just Haley Tetreault, I think my handle is. And my info is all posted on the Sask Wheat website. And they can reach out to me via email, which is haley.tetreault@saskwheat, or phone. So there's lots of ways to find me.
Okay, sounds good. They'll like you check out the website if you're looking for more information. And thank you everyone who tuned in today. It's we've had a lot of interaction and comments, so thank you very much for all your comments and your kind words. We appreciate it very much. Wouldn't be able to do the show without you guys, and that's, I guess, what makes it so unique, makes it so much fun, so different than what else we have going on out in webinar world and COVID world. We like to be able to still have that little bit of interaction. So thank you very much. And for those of you that are maybe looking for some more wheat agronomy, as I said earlier, check out www.wheatschool.com. We have some of our wheat schools that are based more in the west with me as the host, and some that are based in the east with Bernard Tobin as the host. So there we cover all across Canada and all wheat agronomy. So be sure to check that out. And especially as the growing season progresses, we'll be posting more and more. So check that out at www.wheatschool.com. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you guys all on Monday.